There is a roll of papyrus in the British Museum that is 41 meters long. Laid flat, it would run the length of the building's front steps and keep going. It stands a little over 40 centimeters tall, and it is the longest papyrus anyone has ever dug out of the ground. Its catalog number is 4 nines, EA 9999. It is written in a fast, practiced hand, in columns, 117 of them, close to 1,500 lines. And most of it is a list. Grain, cattle, land, ships, gardens. Men and women handed over to the gods, counted by the head. It reads like the accounts of a very large estate, because that is what it is. The estate of a dead king, totaled up and signed away, one god at a time. The king is Ramesses III. He had been dead about a year when the first column was written. His son commissioned the roll, put the words into his dead father's mouth, and had the corpse speak in the first person about a reign of 31 years. Calm, restored, well-fed, secure. 41 meters of it. And in none of those 1,500 lines does the king say how he died. The documents that say how he died were written by other hands, filed in other cities, and never meant to sit on the same shelf as this one. When you put them side by side, the papyrus stops being an accounts book. It becomes the thing a man writes when he needs you to look at the money and not at the body. The translation has existed since 1876. Any reader can find it in English, in full, in a good library. Almost no one has. There is a century and a half of scholarship on this roll, and when it comes to films, near silence. It is the largest document the ancient world handed us, and it is close to the least looked at. If you want the record itself, and the single fact it was built to bury, hit subscribe now. This channel reads the papyri the documentaries never unroll. Start with how it surfaced, because that matters here. In 1855, local residents digging on the west bank at Thebes, in the cliffs behind the mortuary temple of Medinet Habu, broke into a hole in a tomb floor and found a stack of papyri hidden there. This roll was the giant among them. There was no excavation report, no archaeologist standing over the find. There was a hole and men who knew that Europeans paid for old paper. The paper reached a man named Anthony Charles Harris, a British collector living in Alexandria. He died in 1869. His daughter, Salima Harris, sold his collection, and in 1872, Samuel Birch bought the Great Roll for the British Museum. The museum did to it what museums did then. They cut the 41-meter scroll into sections and mounted them under glass. 79 frames. EA 9999, sheet 1 through sheet 79. Then Birch published it in 1876 and made a quiet mistake that lasted 100 years. He treated the 79 glass frames as if they were the papyrus's own divisions. They were not. They were where the conservators had chosen to cut. The ancient roll was built from separate sheets of papyrus, each around 40 centimeters wide, pasted end to end in a workshop. In 1933, Wolja Eriksson set the writing on a firmer footing, renumbering the whole text by its 117 ancient columns, and that column and line system is still how a scholar points to a passage in it today. Then, in 1994, Pierre Grandet went back to the physical object and pulled the two apart, where the ancient maker had joined a sheet. Where a 19th century curator had taken a knife. For a century, part of what scholars thought they saw in this document was the British Museum's glazing, not the scribe's plan. Hold that, because it is the shape of the whole thing. A record that has been read for 150 years and still hides where the seams really are. There are 6 things in this papyrus worth counting through, and we will take them in order. First, what the ledger actually tallies. Second, the one god who ends up owning most of it. Third, the speech the dead king gives at the end, and the year that speech leaves out. Fourth, the crime the papyrus will not name, and the documents that name it. Fifth, the trial, the punishments, and the men stripped of their own names. And sixth, the body, and what a hospital scanner found under the bandages of Ramesses III in 2012. 6 counts. Then, the weighing. We begin with what the ledger tallies. The roll does not open with numbers. It opens with pictures. 3 large painted scenes, each showing Ramesses standing with his hands raised before a group of gods. The gods of Thebes in the first, the gods of Memphis in the second, the gods of Heliopolis in the third. Behind each picture, the columns of accounts begin, as if every figure that follows were the receipt for the piety in the painting. The image makes the claim. The numbers are there to back it. For roughly 19 out of every 20 columns, Papyrus Harris I is an inventory of gifts to the temples. It is organized the way a careful steward would organize it. God by god, the estate of Amun at Thebes, then Ra at Heliopolis, then Ptah at Memphis, then the smaller provincial shrines. Under each god, the same headings repeat. What the god's estate holds, what income comes in, what the king newly gave, what grain feeds the old festivals, what feeds the new ones he founded. It is dry, it is repetitive, it is meant to be. A gift to a god is only real if it is written down and countable. And this scribe counts everything. Then, at the end, the roll adds it all up. The grand totals for the temples of Egypt, as Breasted read them in 1906 and Grandet confirmed in 1994, run like this. 107,615 people. 490,386 head of cattle. Just over 1 million arouras of land. 88 ships. 160 towns inside Egypt, and 9 more abroad. 513 gardens. Read that list again, and notice the first item. Not the cattle, not the land, the people. 107,000 men, women, and children entered into a ledger the same way as the ships and the gardens, because to the state, that is what they were. A temple owned fields. It owned, in the same breath and the same column, the hands that worked them. The papyrus even preserves the friction of real accounting. The scribe's own written total is 107,609. The categories underneath add up to 6 more. Somewhere in 41 meters, A clerk's arithmetic slipped by 6 people, and no one ever went back to fix it. This is a slave ledger. It is also a tax document, a legal deed, and a work of theology, and the Egyptians saw no seam between those things. And the movable wealth is counted just as hard. To Thebes alone, the papyrus enters an offering of 309,950 sacks of grain, set down beside metals and precious stones weighed out by the deben, the standard weight of the metal trade. Tens of thousands of deben of gold and silver across the temples of Egypt. Every sack, every weight, every animal has passed through a scribe's hand and been made to balance. This is a document that would sooner die than leave a total open. Now, the second count. The one God who owns most of it. Line the temples up by the people assigned to them, and the numbers stop being even. Of that 107,000, the estate of Amun at Thebes holds 86,486. Ra at Heliopolis, about 12,000. Ptah at Memphis, near 3,000. Everyone else divides the rest. Amun alone holds around 8 in every 10 temple dependents in the country. The land splits the same way. Amun's share runs to hundreds of thousands of arouras, most of it in the south. Set the temple land against the whole of Egypt's farmland, and here is the figure that has kept economic historians busy for decades. Sally Qatari puts the temple holdings in this papyrus at somewhere between 13 and 18% of all the cultivatable land in Egypt. Grandet went further for the south alone. Because so much of Amun's estate sat in Upper Egypt, he estimated the god of Thebes may have controlled something close to half the farmland of the whole upper country. That last figure is an estimate, and Grandet flagged it as one. The direction it points is not in doubt. Do the same sum with people instead of land, and it cuts 2 ways. 107,000 temple dependents is only about 2 or 3 in every 100 Egyptians, against a whole population of 3 or 4 million. 1 in 30 counted as raw heads. But if those lists set down the head of each household and not every mouth beneath his roof, then multiply by a family, and the share of Egypt tied to the temples climbs toward 1 in 5 or 6. That second figure is a reconstruction, not a number written in the papyrus, and it should be named as one. Either way, the temples were not a corner of the economy. They were a large slice of the country, wearing the mask of an offering list. James Breasted, reading these totals a century ago, drew the obvious conclusion. A priesthood that controls this much land and this many people is no longer a servant of the crown. It is a rival to it. He saw in these columns the Temple of Amun quietly swallowing the Egyptian state. Grandet read the same columns and gave a colder warning. These are not a snapshot. They are cumulative. They pile up 31 years of gifts, confirmations and reconfirmations, into one grand total. And they deliberately blur 2 different things: what the temples already owned and what this one king gave them. A field Amun had held for 2 centuries and a field Ramesses handed over last year sit in the same column with no line between them. The document wants you to read every aurora as this king's generosity. Some of it was. Much of it was simply already there. So the number is true, and the picture is a lie. at the same time, on purpose. That is the first thing to understand about this papyrus. It does not falsify its figures. It arranges them. We do not know what a single one of those 107,000 people was called. The ledger counts them. It does not name them. The naming in this story is saved for the guilty. The third count, the speech at the end, and the year it leaves out. The last stretch of the roll, the final 1 part in 20, drops the inventory and turns into a voice. The dead king addresses the living. He tells them where Egypt had been before his family took the throne, and it is a portrait of collapse. The land had no leader. Every man did as he pleased. The gods were treated like men, and their offerings stopped. And a Syrian, a man the text calls Irsu, made himself a chief over the whole country and put the whole land under tribute to himself. Then Ramesses' father, Setnakhte, set it all right, drove out the foreigners, and gave the temples back their due. Grandet identified that passage for what it is. It is not a chronicle, it is a genre. Egyptian kings had a standard story for how a dynasty begins. Chaos, a foreign face on the chaos, and then order restored by the rightful house. The Syrian named Irsu is doing a job in the text. He is the darkness, the new king is the light against. Then the king lists his victories. This is where the Sea Peoples appear, the confederation that broke over the eastern Mediterranean in his reign. The papyrus says he destroyed them utterly. It says a stockade of lances surrounded them on the shore, and they were laid low on the beach, slain, and made into heaps from head to tail. It is a magnificent line. It is also propaganda, and modern scholars treat it as such. Whether the Sea Peoples were annihilated, or scattered, or partly settled inside Egypt's own borders, the total victory this papyrus claims is the version the winner paid to have written. The same section counts the human spoil of those wars. The captured peoples, the text says, their wives and their children with them, were taken in tens of thousands, branded and marked with the king's name, and handed over to the temples as labor. Some of the people entered at the very top of the ledger. The ones assigned to Amun were men who had been carried into Egypt on the point of a spear. And the king lists his ventures abroad with the same appetite. A great well sunk in the desert at Ayan. Ships sent down the Red Sea to Punt for incense. Miners sent to the copper country at Attika, who loaded the metal by the 10,000 into the ships and stacked it back home in bars, the papyrus says, in heaps like 100,000s. Crews sent into Sinai for turquoise. It is a whole reign, told as things brought in and things given away. And then the voice softens into something almost sweet. The king says he planted trees so people could sit in the shade. He says he let a woman walk wherever she wanted to go, without a man to protect her, and no one troubled her on the road. He says he settled his soldiers and their families in peace. And at the very end, the dead man turns to his god and asks Amun to protect his son and to keep the throne firmly under the boy who comes after him. The future Ramesses IV. Read that plea cold, and it stops sounding like a blessing. It sounds like fear. A secure king, at the end of a serene reign, does not need to beg a god, to hold his son's throne down. Here is the year the speech leaves out. In year 29 of this same reign, 3 years before the king died, the men who cut the royal tombs at Deir el-Medina downed their tools and walked off the job because the state had not delivered their grain. It is the first recorded strike in human history. The rations were late, the men were hungry, and the administration this papyrus calls flawless could not feed the small, essential workforce that built its king's eternity. Grande's point again. The document does not lie so much as select. The strike is real, it is documented, and it is nowhere in these 41 meters. The ledger is the reign as the palace needed it remembered. The strike is the reign as the workmen lived it. Only one of them got mounted under glass and called a masterpiece. The fourth count. The crime the papyrus will not name. Now we leave Papyrus Harris I and go to the documents it was built to talk over. They sit in different collections in different countries because in antiquity, a thief cut a single legal roll into pieces and scattered it. The main one is in Turin, in the Museo Egizio, catalogued 1875. It is called the Judicial Papyrus of Turin, and it is the summary record of a trial for murder. The victim named in it is Ramesses III. Here is what happened, as the trial record and its companions lay it out. In year 32, during the beautiful festival of the valley, the great feast of the dead at Thebes, an attempt was made on the king's life inside the royal harem in the western tower of the palace at Medinet Habu. The same Medinet Habu whose cliffs, 3,000 years later, would give up the great papyrus. The temple that stored the king's serene memory and the compound where he was attacked are the same walls. The plot began with a woman, a secondary wife named Tia, who was not the mother of the heir. She wanted her own son, a prince the record calls Pentawar, on the throne instead of the designated successor, who was another wife's boy. So she built a conspiracy inside the household. And the record of it reads like an organization chart, because that is how the court investigated it. Pebekemen, the chief of the chamber, the man who ran the king's private quarters, carried the messages in and out. The overseer of the treasury, a man named Peri, supplied a pass to get people to the king. Butlers, an overseer of cattle, scribes of the harem, army standard bearers, and letters were smuggled out of the harem to officers in the field, telling them to raise the country, stir up the people, make rebellion against their lord. This was not a lone knife in the dark. It was an inside job that reached from the king's pantry to his army. And it had a second half that was meant to catch fire in the streets the moment he was dead. And then there is the method that makes this trial unlike any other, the part filed away in the companion documents. Some of the plotters used magic. One roll, Papyrus Woylan, held today in Paris under the catalog name Egyptian 195, describes the making of written spells and figures of wax, meant to weaken the limbs of the men guarding the king, to open a path through them. The Egyptologist Hans Godik worked through these fragments in 1963 and pointed out the detail that frightened the court most. The spells were not folk charms bought in a market. Whoever made them had reached into a royal library of magical texts the kind of book the palace itself kept under lock. The poison, in other words, came from inside the house. The king was inside a festival, inside his own temple, inside his own harem, guarded by men his own servants were working spells to soften. The safest place in Egypt had been hollowed out from within. The fifth count, the trial, the punishments, and the men stripped of their names. The trial was run by the victim's son, the heir the plot had tried to skip, the man who would reign as Ramesses IV. And he ran it in his dead father's name, as though the murdered king were still on the throne, pronouncing judgment on his own murderers. He appointed 12 judges and named them in the record. The dossier walks through 3 main sessions against the conspirators, and then 2 more against a problem the court had not expected, which we will come to. Keep in mind what this Turin document actually is. It is not a court transcript taken down as men spoke. It is a summary, written up afterwards by the side that had won. And it holds exactly what the winners wanted kept, and nothing they did not. We are reading the murder of a king through the paperwork of the son who caught the murderers. That is not a neutral witness, but it is a witness that names names. Watch what the record does to the accused. When a condemned man's name is written down, it is often changed. A conspirator whose real name honored a god has that name inverted into a curse. One of the butlers is entered as Mezidsur, which means Ra hates him. The chief of the chamber is set down as Pebekamen, the blind servant. His real name, which probably carried the god Amun inside it, deliberately broken. The overseer of the harem becomes Panic, the demon. Scholars reconstruct some of the originals. The man cursed as Ra hates him was very likely, in life, a merry ray. Ra loves him. But that reconstruction is a modern guess.
The papyrus did the erasing on purpose, so that no god's name would stand next to a traitor, and so the man would go into the afterlife under a curse instead of a blessing. Even the ringleader's son is not given a straight name. The record calls the prince Pentawar, and then adds, plainly, that this was that other name. The name he was really born with is gone. The court unpersoned him in the writing. Now the verdicts. Of roughly 38 people condemned, the record has around 28 put to death by the state.
About 10 more, the ones it calls great criminals, including the prince, were made to end their own lives. The line for the prince is short and cold. They left him where he was, and he took his own life. How the executions were carried out, the papyrus does not say. Susan Redford has suggested burning, which to an Egyptian was the worse sentence, because a body destroyed by fire had no afterlife to walk into. That is her reading, not the document's word. The document simply stops at the fact of death. And then the trial produced its own scandal, the 2 extra sessions. Some of the very judges appointed to try the case were caught, during the proceedings, drinking and consorting with the accused women of the harem they were supposed to be judging. The punishment for those men is recorded exactly. 2 of the judges, named Pybese and Mai, and a police captain, had their noses and their ears cut off. The court that was cleansing the palace had to stop and cleanse itself. As for Tiye, the wife who started it, the record says nothing about how she ended. Her punishment is simply not there. She and her son had their tombs robbed and their names scratched out so completely that the only reason we know either of them existed is this trial for their crime. We do not know what happened to Ta. She organized the killing of a pharaoh and then vanishes out of the bottom of the page. The plot half worked and half failed. The king was killed. The prince never reached the throne. The son the conspiracy tried to erase held it, and buried his father, and buried the memory of the whole affair under 41 meters of gifts to the gods. That was where the story sat for 3,000 years. The ledger said one thing, the trial said another, and a reasonable person could still wonder whether the old king truly died under the knife that night, or survived the attack and lived to convene the court himself, since the papyrus opens in his living voice. There was a clue in the paperwork. One of the companion rolls, Papyrus Lee, already speaks of the king as the great god, the phrase the Egyptians kept for a pharaoh who was dead. But a phrase can be argued with, and for a century it was. A body cannot be argued with. That question was answered, in the end, not by a translator, but by a scanner. The sixth count. The body. The mummy of Ramesses III survived because ancient priests moved it. His original tomb, one of the largest ever cut in the Valley of the Kings, and catalogued today as KV11, was emptied. And his body was carried, with dozens of other kings, to a hidden shaft at Deir el-Bahri, and sealed away from robbers. It came to rest in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, catalogue number 61,083, one of the best preserved royal bodies we have. For over a century, no one could examine the one part of him that mattered. His neck was wrapped in a thick collar of linen, layers of it, far more than the embalmers gave anyone else. You could not see what it hid without unwrapping the king, and no one would. In 2012, a team led by Zahi Hawass and the German scientist Albert Zink put the wrapped body through a computed tomography scanner and read the neck without touching it. Under the linen was a wound. A single deep cut, straight across the throat, about 70 millimeters wide, 7 centimeters, running back through the windpipe and the gullet and the great vessels on both sides, all the way down to the neck bones. Zink's own description is flat. The cut is very deep, very large. It goes down almost to the spine, and it had to have been lethal. Nothing that made that wound left the man alive to hold a trial. The old king did not linger. He was killed where he stood, and his son ran the court over his corpse. Then, the scan found the second thing, the thing that closes the argument. Tucked inside the wound, sealed under the bandages, the embalmers had placed a small amulet, a wedget, an eye of Horus, the standard sign of healing and protection. They had put it into the cut, like a surgeon packing a wound, to make the king whole again for eternity, and then wrapped it out of sight. That amulet is the proof the cut was not made by a tomb robber centuries later. The people who buried him knew about the wound. They worked around it. They hid it, and they tried to heal it with magic on the same body the ledger insisted had died at peace. A later scan, published by Sahar Salim and Hawass in 2017, found more. The king's left big toe had been hacked off by a heavy blade, an axe or something like it, and the bone showed no sign of healing, which means it happened at or around the moment of death. The embalmers had fitted him a false toe of linen and packed 6 more amulets around his feet. A slit throat is one weapon. A severed toe is another. One man with one knife did not do both. The forensic reading is that more than one attacker reached the king that night, with more than one kind of blade. And then the same study reached for the other body. Among the kings in that hidden cache was an unlabeled coffin holding a young man the catalogs call Unknown Man E, entered in Cairo as 61,098. He is wrong in every way a royal mummy can be wrong. He was never properly embalmed. His organs were left inside him. He was wrapped, of all things, in the skin of a goat, a material an Egyptian considered ritually unclean, on a body meant for eternity. His coffin carries no name, and his face is frozen in what looks like a scream. He was 18 or 20 when he died. The 2012 team took genetic samples from the old king and from this young man. They share the same Y chromosome line, passed father to son, and half their other markers match. In genetic terms, that is a first-degree relationship. This screaming boy in the goatskin was a son of Ramesses III, a prince, punished in death exactly the way a condemned traitor would be punished. Denied his embalming, denied his name, denied a clean burial, and left to go into the dark with his face still open. He fits the prince from the trial almost too well. But say the limit plainly, because the scientists did. The genetic test proves father and son. It does not prove which son. The specific prediction of his ancestry rests on a partial method, not the fuller one. And S.O.Y. Keita has cautioned that this kind of reading leans hard on which comparison populations you choose. His actual cause of death could not be read from the body. So we do not know, as a certainty, that the screaming man is Pentuer. We know he is a son of the murdered king, buried in disgrace, in the same reign the trial condemned a son of the murdered king to die. The rest is the strongest circumstantial case in Egyptology, and it is still circumstantial. That is the 6th count. Now weigh it. What is established is this: the papyrus is real, and it is the largest we have, and it is a posthumous account of Ramesses III, composed under his son. The throat was cut down to the bone, and the wound was fatal, and the people who buried the king knew it and hid an amulet inside it. There was a conspiracy run out of the harem, tried by the heir, and it condemned around 38 people, including a prince who was made to take his own life. Those are not theories. They are a document in Turin and a wound in Cairo. What is contested is almost everything the ledger wants to sound certain about. The exact years of the reign shift by a few years depending on which ancient sky-watching you trust. The annihilation of the sea peoples is the palace's boast, not a battlefield count. The donation totals are cumulative and arranged, and the share of Egypt they represent carries wide margins. Whether the Temple of Amun was really strangling the state, as Breasted thought, or whether the papyrus just makes it look that way, is still argued. And what is unknown stays unknown, and this channel says so. We do not know the birth name of the prince the court cursed as Pentaware. We do not know how T died, or whether she was executed at all. We do not know the name of one single person among the 107,000 the ledger counted like cattle. The papyrus was designed to make sure of that last one. It names the gods and their property in full, and it leaves the property that could breathe anonymous.
None of this was kept from us by a conspiracy, and that is the part worth saying out loud. The translation has been in print for 150 years. The trial has been published and picked over. The body has sat in a museum the whole time. The distance here is not the distance between a secret and a cover-up. It is the distance between what a civilization carved to last and what it happened to jot down and throw in a hole. Ramesses IV did not have to bury the truth about his father. He outbuilt it. 41 meters of gold ink accountancy against a few meters of trial notes in Turin, and only one of them got called a masterpiece and put behind glass. Here is the whole thing in one frame. A son loses his father to an assassin's knife in the family harem. He hunts down the killers, cuts the noses off the judges who went soft, forces a brother to suicide, erases their names so they cannot even rest. And then he sits down and writes 41 meters about grain. Not one line about the knife. Not one line about the trial he ran. The longest document in the ancient world is, at its heart, an act of looking away, carried out in gold ink at industrial length. It is the most expensive silence ever written down. The wound tells the truth the papyrus refuses to. And the wound only survived to be read because the priests who cut the king's tomb open moved his body somewhere the ledger never mentions. A cleft in the cliff at Deir el-Bahri, sealed and forgotten, where 40 pharaohs were stacked together in the dark to keep them from being robbed. Tomb 320, the royal cache. That is where they hid their kings when the state that wrote this papyrus could no longer protect its own dead. That is the next document. The hole in the cliff and the day it was opened.